where we share hope, encouragement, and above all, provide accurate mental health education in a misinformation TikTok world. I'm your guest, Erica Gregory. I'm a marriage and family therapist and the owner of JCA Counseling. I know the impact of poor mental health on individuals, families, and the community. So I've created JCAC and this podcast because I'm passionate about starting conversations about mental health to reduce the stigma and increase the availability of mental health resources. In our episode today, we're going to discuss postpartum depression and postpartum mood disorder. We want to bring awareness to this common condition that impacts new mothers. I myself went through postpartum with my firstborn, and I had a hard time spotting it with all my mental health knowledge and my awareness. I'm passionate about helping other women know what to look for and connect them to resources. So I'm really excited today to have joining with me Janice Collins, a certified nurse midwife with Inspire OBGYN. She is a certified nurse midwife with over 30 years experience caring for women and newborns. The first 10 years of her career, she worked bedside as a postpartum nurse, helping women recover from their deliveries and launch their new lives as mothers. She's always had this particular passion for the transition into motherhood, which has continued to shape her practice as she's delivered babies for the last 20 years. She's proud to have the privilege to care for thousands of women and helping them navigate the challenges of pregnancy and motherhood. And I'm just thrilled to have you on, Janice, so you can share your knowledge and wisdom with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All righty, so let's dive in with our first question. We commonly use the phrase postpartum depression to describe any women going through anything postpartum after their delivery. But women can experience way more than depression after the delivery of a baby. So can you unpack all the different disorders women can go through either during their pregnancy or after?
So it is a pretty broad range. I think historically we've focused on postpartum depression, an extension of the baby blues. That's kind of something most families are familiar with. But actually, there's been, in recent years, there's been more of a change, and we're looking at it more as in the framework of postpartum or perinatal mood disorders. Perinatal meaning it happens during pregnancy as well. And some of that has to do with the world that we live in. In one study, anxiety is now a bigger player in postpartum or perinatal mood disorders. And anxiety in a 9-year period, and this was before COVID, in a 9-year period, anxiety in pregnancy increased from 18% to 42%.
Wow.
So anxiety has really become an issue in the world that we live in for all the reasons that everyone who is living and watching and listening to this understands. Anxiety is a big concern. And then depression is also a big concern. And there are a lot of physiologic changes that can affect mood. And then there's also physiological changes to the brain that can affect mood. Women's brains actually change during pregnancy, and the change is physical. And it is so remarkable that with using AI can detect the difference between a woman who's had a baby and a woman who has not, because the brain changes and they're permanent. And we think that they're actually functional and adaptive, that perhaps they help the mother focus on the newborn, and they have, things that have to do with maybe empathy and things like that, things that are very essential to caring well for a newborn baby. But the fact is that your brain is different. And all that implies, I think in the past, and I've actually gone past the question that you asked me, but I think in the past, women and maybe their family members who lived with them had the perception that baby blues or postpartum depression was a form of maladaptation. Maybe a mother who wasn't dealing well with the stresses of a newborn or the stresses of living, with getting breastfeeding launched and having had a difficult delivery. And now we actually know that it's more of a physiological process.
It's medical. Your brain has changed, and now you have a medical grade depression that has nothing to do with the situational, the circumstances around you of poor sleep, navigating the beginning of becoming a mother, I remember when I had my own bout of postpartum depression. And one of the reasons why I couldn't pin it and I didn't realize that that's what it was is one, it was my first. And two, I was so different. I felt so different. I didn't have any natural motivation, but I was also exhausted. So it was easy to sweep away the symptoms of, well, I just have a bunch of hormone changes going on right now, or I haven't been sleeping very well. So, of course, I'm tired. And so I wonder for women, because so much is different, it's hard to pinpoint. I wonder if we could focus on that for a second of what are the clear indications as a provider yourself that this mother I'm speaking with who's coming in to check in with me is going through depression versus she's just struggling with a lack of sleep.
So one of the things that I say often in my job is you don't have to know anything that I know. You just have to know my phone number. And the reason I say that is
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm,
sleep deprivation is actually a form of torture. And you are not yourself in any circumstances if you're not sleeping. And that actually begins during pregnancy. The last trimester of pregnancy is very physically uncomfortable, and it's very common for
yep.
women to have a lot of sleep disruption. And most women today, they're working or they already have children or both. And so they have very complicated lives and a lot of demands on them. And they maybe have this feeling that they're sinking, but they've got so many plates in the air that they don't really recognize what's happening. So particularly
Mm-hmm,
everybody
mm-hmm,
sort of knows to look for the baby blues after the baby comes. So most people are kind of alert to that. And one of the things that I say to families is that if after 2 weeks, 2 weeks is kind of the grace period, you're going through a tremendous amount of hormonal changes, the baby's completely unpredictable, everything's fair for the first 2 weeks. It is normal to hug your baby and smile 1 second and turn around and start crying the next second. That is completely normal. Just a thunderstorm of hormones going crazy inside of you. After that 2 week period, or when you're in pregnancy, when someone that really cares about you and really knows you well looks at you one day and says, "You just don't seem like yourself," or you find yourself not enjoying your life or trying to make excuses for why you don't, you're pretending that you feel better than you do because you feel like you're supposed to, those are reasons to call. Those are, reach
mm-hmm,
out and
mm-hmm.
to your provider, your OB providers particularly, and let them know that you're having a struggle. Because there's also, again, with the brain thing, there's also physical things that happen during pregnancy and after pregnancy that can have an impact on your mood that may be treatable,
Mhm,
even anemia, something very simple and very common, or hypothyroidism. Those are very simple and very common and very easy to treat, but your provider doesn't know that you're having a problem if you don't tell them. There's certain benchmark things that we will be checking for during your pregnancy, but not everything, and so if you come into your visit and it's your 30-minute visit that you have once a month, and you're beautifully dressed and your hair is done and you're smiling and you're polite, we're not going to know that you're sinking. So you just, like I said, you don't have to know what I know. You just have to know my phone number, and you got to call and let us
mhm,
know.
mhm. Absolutely, and that's such a good marker, the 2-week marker, because when I reflect back on my own experience, the 2 weeks were actually the best part
Mm-hmm.
because I had this almost euphoria, surrounded by family, but then after the 2 weeks is really when I started to start sinking and feel really lost, and just not enjoying my baby like I thought I would. I mean, I couldn't wait to be a mother, and now it's like I barely can feel like I could connect with my newborn. I wasn't getting out, like, walking and strolling with the baby and different things like I thought I would, and it's like all the things I had planned weren't happening, and I
I
just
think
kinda got lost in myself. Is it maybe a good
right.
way of maybe just feeling lost is a broad enough term for any woman can really kind of relate to that if that's where they're feeling.
You also said something else very important. I'm not enjoying the baby like I thought I would. I was really, really
Mhm,
looking forward to having this baby, and I'm not enjoying it. That not enjoying, that's one of the definitions of mood disorder, is that it either prevents you from doing the things that you need to do in life, or it prevents you from enjoying your life. it is very difficult to live with a new baby. They are a lot of work, but
Mm-hmm.
there's also a lot of joy. And it's a very special time in your life that for most of us, many of the women in this area and in the US period, a large family is 5 or 6 children. So that means maybe 5 or 6 times in your life. But for some women, they only have a pregnancy and a delivery once or twice in their whole life. So you don't want to waste that time lost and missing it. What I wish I could do is remove the shame. Most women, if they do
Mm.
recognize that they're not enjoying it, or if they do recognize they don't like living with a newborn, they're so embarrassed. They don't want to tell anybody. And that delays them maybe getting the medication that they need or getting the counseling that they need or the support that they need. Sometimes you just need a nap. You just need to be able to ask for help. Maybe your baby,
Right.
maybe you need to put the 2-year-old in daycare. So or at least half a day so that you can get a little bit of respite. So there's a lot of solutions, but the first thing we've got to get past is just being too embarrassed to ask for help.
And that is so true because there's this, like, I should be
Hmm.
feeling, thinking, doing this as a new mother, and so much shame if I'm not. Like, it's almost like I'm not, I couldn't be that I'm depressed. I'm just a bad person. Like that kind of mindset will take you away from, I can ask for help, help will work, versus I'm just doomed with this. And
Right.
so mindset plays such a big role in all of this. And that's something we unpack in counseling, where we can identify by just having a conversation like this, talking about your experience. We can clearly identify, like, oh, I can hear the different mindset that is taking you to a place leading you to more of a shame. How dare I? Can't believe this about myself. Versus I am a new mother who is struggling with depression versus I am a horrible mother who's not good enough for their child. Very different mindsets. And if those are if your thoughts are starting to go in that direction, I also would probably label that as a huge warning sign of talk to your OB or start your counseling search for someone who can walk alongside you and help you with finding the help you need, or navigating the depression postpartum. But I
So
also heard you say in reference that this can start while you're pregnant, right?
absolutely.
So you said perinatal depression. Is that what you called it?
Yes.
And
So
that goes overlooked, I bet, a lot because it's not as coined as a term. It's not as known about. So in your practice, what have you seen? How has that shown up in the women you've worked with?
so it I'm very fortunate in my personal practice because I feel like I work with a lot of women who are very empowered. Um, and I'm very fortunate, and I do have a lot of women who I think are already comfortable with addressing their mental health and asking for help and admitting that they're feeling anxiety. I have a lot of women who are already in counseling just because they know that that's an important part of their life. Um, the one thing I would say, I do like that. I like your opener about the TikTok world, and I think that's huge because I think that is a part of the shame. And I would like to remind everybody TikTok videos are curated. And so those people are sending you the best glimpses of their life. I like the woman's where they show the corner of their kitchen that's immaculate and they sweep around and there's pots on the stove like a normal kitchen. The other thing,
Absolutely, yes.
the other
Yeah,
thing I would,
that social media gives such a false view of how other people are living or how well they're doing, or even messages of like, get your 6-week body back after, and such unrealistic expectations
right,
that set you up to compare yourself to something that's not even real.
exactly, exactly. Movie stars with personal trainers and dietitians. The other thing I would say is this: yes, a lot of mood disorders begin in pregnancy. Pregnancy is an incredibly stressful time. I work with a provider who calls pregnancy the ultimate stress test. And I think that's a wonderful
Mm.
thing of thinking about it because for a lot of women, if you have a physical vulnerability, perhaps you're intolerant to metabolizing certain types of carbohydrates, you are going to become diabetic. It's not because
Mhm.
pregnancy made you diabetic, it's that when your body was put under the stress of a pregnancy, this diabetes revealed itself. So this was a weakness that you already had.
Mm.
Pregnancy is the ultimate stress test. The thing that I would like to say, and it's very important, and I know this is a serious topic, but it's very important for women and also for families to understand that perinatal mood disorders in pregnancy and in the postpartum period up to a year after pregnancy are dangerous. The
Mhm.
greatest risk during pregnancy is perinatal suicide. Perinatal suicide is accountable for up to 20% of maternal deaths during pregnancy and in the first year
Wow.
postpartum. So this is a
20% of deaths. I just
20%.
kind of want to slow down and focus, put a limelight on that of all the
So,
different things that can hurt women or take a woman's life in the
yeah,
pregnancy. It's the depression.
right.
It's the
It's an
suicidality.
untreated mood
Wow.
disorder. So suicide is incredibly dangerous. Mood disorders are dangerous. They're treatable, but they can be very dangerous. And that risk, that 20% cause of maternal deaths during pregnancy and in the postpartum, that is higher than the risk of postpartum hemorrhage and
Mm,
hypertensive disorders. And because of the news and celebrities and things like that, women have become very aware of the risks of postpartum hemorrhage and postpartum and hypertensive disorders of pregnancy and in the postpartum period. And so now women need to become aware of how dangerous mood disorders can be. And we
and
need to
how
give
it's
those
just
the same
almost
attention.
like we need a checklist for OBGYNs to review at maybe different stages. Cause I don't remember being asked much about my emotional or mental health
Right,
back when I was going to my OB at the
right.
time. And I remember you saying that it's like there almost needs to be a greater awareness and education, even within the OBGYN sphere, of just good questions to ask and resources to give women that there's not many available.
Yes. Exactly. And so, this is medicine is alive and it changes and we learn new things and we incorporate new things. Pregnancy is a big process and, it's a big life event. And there's a lot of things that providers are looking for when they're providing prenatal care. And mental health is bubbling up. It's becoming a bigger and bigger concern. But for a lot of providers, it was not part of basic training. So a lot of providers
Mm,
are, we do have tools, we do have screening tools that we can use in pregnancy to screen for mental health. And we do have
great,
one that
great.
is pretty much standard in a postpartum visit. But, sometimes we have to depend on our mental health colleagues for
Hmm,
support and
hmm.
for help with dealing with women with mental health issues because we are trained to identify and screen, but we're not really trained to treat
Gotcha.
extensively. We can treat physical things and we can treat, we have some basic mood disorders. We can treat anxiety and we can treat, simple anxiety, simple depression. We can treat those things during pregnancy and in the postpartum period, but we kind of rely on our mental health partners for help
Right,
with
right.
counseling and things like that.
And so, with the medication medical side of it that you can help women with by writing those prescriptions, getting them connected with the right medication, what a lot of research is showing is that the effectiveness, there's my word, effectiveness of medication combined with counseling, it's like it doubles that effectiveness
Mhm.
because you're not only, if your brain is working as it should now, how you were before, you've already created that mindset, those thought patterns, those habits. If you continue those habits, even if your brain's working perfectly, you're still stuck in this negative, shameful place
Right.
that will hold you down despite your anatomy working perfectly. So it's like that. We have to have both sides of the coin at the same time. And a
Mhm.
lot of women and just a lot of people in general don't know the difference between a counselor, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist. And so I'll break those apart because I think it's really essential in looking for the right help when you're in a place of depression or despair, because it's already hard enough when you're feeling depressed to then look and search for help. So a counselor is who will sit with you for the hour, unpack things weekly, help you dive into your thought patterns, your habits, help you create strategies to overcome the depression. Psychiatrists are the MDs. They are the doctors. They are the ones who can do medical examinations, diagnose you formally with some kind of mental health disorder, and write the right prescription for it. Your OBGYN, primary care doctor, they can write basic SSRI prescriptions for basic depression, simple anxiety, simple depression. But if it's anything above that, if there's psychosis, if there's paranoia, if there's bipolar swings back and forth, then we really do need to incorporate a psychiatrist to help create the medication balance that is so needed. And then psychologists with an O, they're the ones who do a battery of testing to determine if you have ADHD or if you have any other types of disorders, but they're not the ones who can prescribe medication. So this is great for kids at school or different things like that. And some psychologists also do counseling. It depends on how they create their practice. And so most of the time what you're going to be looking for is a counselor or in a counselor psychiatrist duo. And a great way to search for counseling online is to look local. Find local counseling centers in your local area, in your community, so you can go and see someone in person a few times. You have the convenience online if you need it. Rather than getting matched by an algorithm, you need to talk to the potential counselor on the phone 5-10 minutes. Feel how you feel when you're talking to them and let your gut, let your instincts tell you if this is the right person or not. An algorithm, AI can't match that with you. It does not read your instincts. It just goes our battery of questions to say who could be a provider who could potentially help you. But if you go online to local providers and look at bios, you can do that yourself really easily just by reading those bios. And then when you make those phone calls, then you know whoever I'm walking into is someone who already gets me, who already understands and is ready to help. And so that can be really helpful with matching with the right person. And I know after the pandemic, a lot's changed. So you said those stats at the beginning of anxiety, postpartum anxiety has gone up to 40%. That was pre-pandemic, right? And I'm sure that has increased because especially the mothers who's had a child during the lockdown, and now they're having their second, that they might be having some PTSD responses of being so alone and isolated, or alone in the delivery room because their husband couldn't come because he tested positive. Different kind of scenarios that played out that put women in a really tough spot to start their motherhood journey. And what have you been seeing in your practice post pandemic when it comes to just women and how they're working through their pregnancy and deliveries?
Well, I think that for any mother who's ever had a traumatic experience in delivery, or any kind of traumatic medical experience, that all bubbles to the surface in pregnancy, and that oftentimes benefits from being addressed. That's where a good counselor could come in. We do try to take time in our practice and walk through, what actually happened and what is important to you and what can we do to make this experience of your next delivery, your delivery with us, positive and empowering. And, a lot has changed. The pandemic is over. The restrictions are over. People are able to have, women are able to have their support person in their family, and there's still some restrictions in place, but I think it feels a lot more
Mhm.
comfortable. But that's legitimate. I mean, the women and the families who had babies, during the pandemic, and I was delivering during the pandemic, it was not very comfortable, and it felt kind of crazy, and a lot of people were sick and had sicknesses. They themselves were ill or lost family members who were ill, so it was a hard time. The biggest thing I think is you need to it's important for you to talk to your provider. You need to feel safe. That's a really big deal when you have a baby or when you're in a pregnancy. You need to feel really safe with your provider, that your provider is someone who really cares about you and cares about what's important to you and is going to protect you and help you have as much of what you need in this delivery to heal as possible. And we know from a lot of experience that having a good healing delivery, that goes really far. I mean, if you've got really bad PTSD, you've got PTSD, and
Mhm.
that has to be considered in your delivery. We have to know it. You need to know it, and if your provider is if they have the ability, they will do everything in their power to make it as non-scary and non-medical and non-awful as they can. And that usually helps.
Mhm. So the
But
more you
here's,
talk, the more you share, the more the provider can help, is what it
yeah,
sounds like. If you don't know, you have your hands tied behind your back. You don't know how to set them up for success, help them feel comfortable, or connect them with the right help to help them process what's coming with their delivery. If they've had a traumatic delivery, and that could happen because of the pandemic, or it sounds like anything else. If something were to happen to the child or you were, in the ICU, or the baby was in the NICU, and there's a lot of scary things that can happen. And so women kind of fearing and anticipating, will this happen again? There's a lot of work we can do with PTSD and counseling. What the differentiator between PTSD and just having a traumatic experience is how the brain processes it. And so a PTSD response, anytime you think of it, anytime there's a reminder, like being pregnant is a reminder, going and talking about the delivery plan is a reminder. It feels like you're going through it again. Like it was happening all over again,
mhm,
versus I remember how scary that was. I remember how painful that was, as in past, in the back of my mind. It's that flood of emotion that takes over that you have no control stopping. Like I would much rather be grounded and clear and make good decisions, but now I'm flooded with this wave of emotion that isn't going to stop for not hours, days. That's
mhm,
the difference between PTSD and just I went through something bad and I remember that was hard,
mhm.
because how your brain processes is very different if you have diagnosable PTSD or not. And so that's a good differentiator too. If you're actively pregnant right now and you're planning your delivery for your second child, and you're going through that and you're feeling all the emotion of the first delivery, then getting help now will really help you set you up for success, both with your OB and with a good counselor to walk along your side. Because EMDR is an amazing theory model that helps organize the brain, like physically different brain anatomy from pre to post EMDR, of shifting that memory to the past and helping you organize it and integrate it in a way of, I remember how hard that was, but I'm okay now. And so gives you back control and power over your emotion, over your reactions, and over your decision making ability. Because a lot of time when we're emotionally flooded, we're not making good decisions. We're just reacting impulsively. And that impulsive reaction isn't always a good decision. And so, as a new mother with a young baby, and then pregnant with your next, we really want to be grounded and empowered, like you were describing your current clients, of how empowered they are and how emotionally aware and how much they bring to you. I think that's a testament to how comfortable you help them feel and how safe you make them feel to be able to overcome that shame and tell you the truth.
Well, the other thing is that, we do, and I think many providers try to create a safe space for women and for families where they can, be vulnerable and talk about their needs. The other thing, I did touch on that. I hope to, if nothing else happens today, I would hope that anyone who would hear this would hear how important it is to get rid of the shame. The
Hmm.
other thing, because a mental health disorder during pregnancy can be dangerous, but also it's not good for your baby. So I have a lot of women, most mothers, the whole time that I've been taking care of mothers, most mothers will do anything for their baby. I've had mothers who were chain smokers and found out they were pregnant and quit cold turkey, more than I could count. They just don't care. If it's bad for the baby, I'm not doing it. And so,
Hmm. It's not
unfortunately,
about me. It's about taking care of the other. I will do anything to take care of
I'll do
somebody
anything
else.
for the baby. And so a lot of women have the misperception that the medications that we use in pregnancy are dangerous to their baby. First of all, in obstetrics, we have an incredibly short list of medicines that we're allowed to use. And everybody's very careful because obviously the last thing we want to do is injure you or injure your baby. But the impact on a newborn of living with a mother who's depressed is devastating, and it lasts the baby's whole life. So
Hmm.
there are
Hmm.
medicines that we use in pregnancy, particularly to treat depression, but anxiety is really hard to live with as well. And the effects of you being more grounded in your mood and more relaxed and more rested and more calm, depression is very debilitating. It makes you feel like you're underwater. and you don't want to do the things that you need to do to care for a baby. Babies need you to look them in the eye. They need you to laugh at them and flirt with them and tickle them and talk to them in silly voices and say nonsense things and just sort of engage with them the whole day. And if you'll see a newborn, they're sort of staring at their mother almost all the time, waiting for them to do that. And when
I
you're
remember learning a statistic that was just so fascinating is the newborn's eyesight is perfectly aligned for the face to mother holding the baby right here. That's the length of the newborn's eyesight. So to make eye contact, to see the mother's face,
Mhm,
it's perfect for that. I just thought that
right.
was miraculous.
And that's their favorite thing to look at. If you give them a face mobile, that's what they want to look at. But it's very important for the mom to protect her mental health, because by doing that, she's protecting her child. But it's very important because she's sort of protecting her kid for life. Because if you watch
Mm,
a new baby very well, if you give them a beautiful, wonderful birth and you give them a very good infancy, they're sort of set. It sort of
they're
sets the whole.
resilient to
Yes,
so much
yes,
because they have this healthy attachment to you and
yes,
you are safe. You have that secure base. That's
right,
attachment language of, and it's resiliency to so much else in life if you have that connection.
right. And it's again, it's the airplane, the mask analogy. Moms, you got to take care of yourself. You got to eat
Hmm.
right. You got to take prenatal vitamins. You got to sleep. You got to take a bath. You got to drink water. You got to do the stuff, and you got to put the mask on yourself first, the oxygen mask, because you cannot take care of your family and your children if you're not taking care of yourself.
It should be the opposite, right? The family should be coming to the mother to care for her rather than her having to care for the whole family while she's bringing a newborn home. I remember us talking before we did this recording of how different cultures have really set themselves up for better success than the
Sure.
norms that we've created in ours. Can you speak a little to that and what a really
Absolutely.
great ideal situation for support is for a new mom?
So it's very, in my opinion, it's a very American phenomena that women go home. And I ask women all the time, particularly women who I know are going to have a surgical delivery, who is going to be in your house helping you for the first 2 weeks? And they look stunned. And they're like, at my house? And I'm like, yes, with you 24 hours a day, cooking your food, washing your sheets, feeding your family, taking care of your children and your husband. Who is that person? And they just look flabbergasted. So it's a very American phenomenon. In the rest of the world, when women have babies, usually their relatives, usually females, swoop in, take over the care of the house, take over the care of the children. Often it's a mother in law, and they're there for 6 weeks. And, I've even had to like give my discharge instructions to his mother because that is who was going to be running the house for the next 6 weeks. It's usually only in the States where we act like you're just going to go home and act like nothing happened. So I give really strict discharge instructions to my postpartum moms. I don't want them driving the car or running errands or going to picnics or shopping for tires or going to parades for at least the first 2 weeks after a delivery. And that's a
Right.
vaginal delivery. In other parts of the world, there's a phenomenon that I read about I believe it's in South Korea, and there's several of them, and there's specialty hotels for postpartum moms, and mothers vie for those spots. And as soon as they have a positive pregnancy test, they apply to get their spot. And these beautiful hotels are staffed by dietitians and nursery nurses and lactation consultants, and there's spas and there's massages and there's people that can watch your baby so you can sleep. And I think that would be a fabulous thing to do here in the States. We haven't gotten there yet. We're starting to get postpartum doulas, and we're starting to get more postpartum services where people can actually pay for help in their home if they need it. So maybe those hotels will catch on here too.
Hey, that's a great business idea for anyone listening, little entrepreneurs out there, something to take on because I would have bid for one of those spots too. If I could go away and be able to sleep when I needed to sleep, all of be fed well, be helped and supported with my lactation and with my baby latching. Oh my goodness, that sounds like a dream.
It is.
But it just shows the culture difference of like, what do you mean I need help? Of course you need help. Your body just went through trauma
Mhm.
of opening up to 10 centimeters dilated and then moving back, completely adjusting to being pregnant to not being pregnant, recovering and healing from that. You're still bleeding very extensively for the first 2 weeks. That was a big surprise to me until the last trimester when I was like, oh, wait, what? That's going to what happen? Yeah, all of that's happening while at the same time you're supposed to be cooking and cleaning and taking care of a baby, waking up in the middle of the night. Having that support and help is so essential so the mother can heal and
Mhm.
rest.
Mhm.
I'm a go-go bunny. I have a hard time with accepting I need help too. I get
Mhm.
that. I'm right there with you. I was actually told by my OB that if I didn't stop, then I would be, because I wouldn't stop bleeding. And it was because I wasn't healing and I wasn't slowing down enough to let my body heal. And it's like, if you don't stop, you might not be able to have children in the future.
Oh,
Now that
wow.
was just like a blow to me of, wait, what? And the realization of, wait, I'm human. I'm not just, I could just keep going and everything's fine. So I did start resting and I did recover, but it's hard to sometimes accept that we're human and we do need to heal and rest. It's
Mhm.
really easy for us to accept somebody else needs to heal and rest. Someone else we know, our parents, a good friend has major surgery. We're going to go with food. We're going to go and help and support. We tell them to keep resting, do what you need to do. But for ourselves, we don't ever give ourselves that permission, you know?
I
And so
think
it's
I
almost
think
treat yourself as if you want to be treated, because we're so often neglectful to that for ourselves.
I think part of it, particularly because we're talking here from Atlanta, especially in such a metropolitan area, a lot of people in Atlanta are transplants. They're remote, they're far away from their families.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a lot of immediate family support. And I think that's something that we've lost, especially younger people. I'm very fortunate, my mother did come, but I don't live anywhere near her. I was just fortunate that she could come, but a lot of us live and we don't have a lot of community around us, or we have a lot of friends but they all work too.
Mm-hmm.
The days where
Mm-hmm.
we used to be neighbors and we walk across and have coffee in our best friend's house and our children would play, that's kind of uncommon, because even if you don't work and you're fortunate enough to be home with your children, you may be the only woman on your street. I mean, everybody else may have gone to work that morning. So I
Right.
think that's one of the things that's changed in our country. And then also, if you only have a maternity leave of 6 or 12 weeks, a baby waking you up in the middle of the night feels like a crisis, because you have to get up and go to work the next morning. So, there's a lot of things that come with our lifestyle that cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of mood disorders. Some things can be fixed and some things can't. And sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
need, um, I'm not saying that if you can't fix your life, you need drugs. What I'm saying is we should probably at least explore what's going on in our lives and see which parts are working, which parts can we modify, where can we get help. It's okay to ask for help. Where can family and friends, can we carpool? Can we carpool with a neighbor instead of being the only one who runs and gets our kid every single day? Just somebody else on the soccer team with our little boy that could maybe help us. There's just, we need to build community, and that's another piece I think of this conversation, is that a lot of women feel very isolated. And again, they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at what people are doing online and they don't have a lot of personal support. And I think we need to build that back again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And really make that a priority. You know, you're planning how the hospital stay is, you planning your birth plan. Well, what is your community plan? What is your support plan postpartum for who's going to come and live with you? Can a family member fly in for a few weeks? Can some neighbors around you take your other children back and forth to the bus stop for you in the morning? And be really intentional about that plan as well. I mean, I see so much detail going into the gender reveal parties and the cakes and the balloons and the fireworks that go off, all the things. And, you know, we put a lot of time and energy into what feels fun and exciting, but what about just the practical everyday? How are we going to live after this baby is born to where we can thrive and we can create a lifestyle that we find enjoyment in life instead of we feel like a slave to our expectations and our lifestyle. And I see that a lot in families where the families who are in a lot of different sports and events, and they're shocked when their children are stressed. I remember working with a young one who just was so overwhelmed they didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, and what I found is that their life was so planned and structured where every hour of the day there was something. And to where when I advised the parents they need an hour of downtime in the afternoon and like half a day weekend to just rest, the parent looked at me like I was insane. And it's like you need time to slow down, and this expectation that they'll be in all of these extracurriculars and they've got to have all these things when they're to get in college. Let them be a kid. Let yourself be a parent. Go to the park and just play. Yeah, I had another parent. Actually, this was a friend, my husband's good friend, asked me like, my 3-year-old son keeps picking flowers in the fields while they're trying to play soccer, and I keep telling him not to. What should I do? I'm like, take him to fields and let him pick flowers and stop trying to put him in soccer at 3 years old. Because that's what a kid needs to do. That's what he should be doing.
Yeah,
And
right.
so it's shift your expectations to just slow down and be a mom, slow down and be a family, and enjoy these precious moments, because before you know it, you're going to blink and they're 18. That's
Oh
where I'm
gosh.
at. I have teenagers now, and it's just like, oh my goodness, where are my littles? They're gone. They're these big jaded teenagers.
Well, and also shift your expectations of new motherhood that you should be doing it by yourself. Shift your expectations that if
Right.
you can't do it by yourself, or if you need to ask for help, that makes you less somehow. Sometimes that actually builds community and you find friends you didn't know that you had. People are usually just waiting in the wings. And I've been guilty too. I've had things happen in my life, and then later all my friends said, "Why didn't you call me?" And I was like, "Well, I never thought of calling you." And I don't know why I didn't. But, there are people around you. That's that we haven't talked about it yet, but I think moms need moms for friends. There's got to be somebody that that's got to be at least one kid that's sort of in the same age range as your kids. And you might not have everything in common, but you need a friend who's a mom, because there's really only one person who understands what you're going through, and that's somebody who has going through the same thing. And
Absolutely.
there's
They make the
nothing like,
greatest friends.
yes, there's nothing like going to lunch at 2 in the afternoon with somebody else who has a baby, because she gets it. Yes, we have to eat now because this is when there's no people here, and we have to,
Hmm.
and our kids are unpredictable, and maybe we'll get our food and then we'll have to pack it all up to go because our baby says we're done. But
Hmm.
finding community and finding support, it doesn't always have to be something formal. Sometimes it can be informal. It can be friends and Sunday school friends and church friends and community friends and neighbor friends. And that's not meant to be a replacement for professional help if you need professional help or if you want professional help, but it can supplement and give you some extra support and some extra
Hmm.
cushioning and
Hmm.
buffering from the
It can
stress
give
of.
you extra time to rest.
Mhm.
It takes a few things off your plate so that the stress levels can go down. And that can actually give you more room to find the professional help and do the work of healing, not only physically with all the physiological changes and brain changes, but also the emotional changes and identity changes. I mean, you're a mother now, and that's a huge shift. It's not about you anymore. It's about this little person that you've brought into the world. And for a lot of people, that's a hard transition.
Mhm.
I can't just go out with my friends when I want to. I
No.
can't just go drop everything and go to a movie. I have to live based on this baby's schedule. And that's hard. You give up a lot of your freedom, but you gain so much more with the love and the preciousness of a child, of a little you in the world. It's so worth it, but it is a lot of work too. And that's a reality to motherhood. And I, we all struggle and we all have our different roles we have ourselves in and identity. And so just having a space to process that of what kind of mother do I want to be? You know, one of my favorite questions to ask parents when I'm doing intakes for child therapy is, what do you want to repeat and not repeat of what your parents did? And that's usually very telling of the parent, how they were raised. And what are your priorities as parents? What do you really value? If your child as a 25-year-old was doing X, Y, and Z, you'd be like, we were successful as parents. What would that look like? Because then it also paints the picture of kind of, how do you want to be a parent? What do you want to teach them? Giving yourself time and space to reflect on that, because that can give you so much more meaning of, I'm raising a little human that will become an adult that could make an impact on this world.
Another thing that, and I agree with those things. Another thing that I would like to say that I think it's important for people to realize, and I first became aware of this as soon as I started working with new mothers, is that babies come in every circumstance. Babies come when there's been a death in the family. Babies come when there's been a tragedy. Baby comes when daddy still lost his job. Babies come when mom's just started a new job and they don't have any maternity leave. Babies come. They come when you're not ready. And so I think that because there's so much glitz and glam and baby reveals and gender reveals, that if you're actually one of those families where, not that your child was unplanned, but the circumstances of your life are not exactly ideal, there's a lot of sort of, I need to keep this a secret. I need to, this is shameful that, that yes, we're having a baby. I mean, I had a mother who lost her job when she was 32 weeks pregnant. I don't know how. The only
Wow.
reason that it wasn't illegal was because it was part of a large layoff, but she was the primary breadwinner. Her husband was a
Wow.
stay-at-home dad. They had two other children already, and she got laid off when she was 8 months pregnant. And then tell me, how do you keep your poker face when that happens? I mean, how do you
And all the
keep
flood of the stress hormones in her body that
right?
goes right to the
How do you
baby.
keep your Facebook page going when that just happened? So there's a lot, that's the other thing. Normalize the fact that it's not always perfect. You can still be happy. You can still be struggling. You can still be happy that you're having a baby and happy for the child, but struggling because of everything else that's going on in your life, and completely stressed out and completely overwhelmed. And you might need
Kind of
help.
changing that expectation
Help.
of the romantic, everything will be picture perfect, and that shifting that expectation to, things can happen. I've
Well,
worked with
sometimes,
a mother whose husband passed a week before the baby was born. And so
yes,
she was actively in the middle of absolute grief because it was a complete surprise car accident. And then now trying to be a mother to a newborn. I mean,
yes,
that just alone, I cannot imagine, but it's the getting support, the help, the mental health support as
yes,
well, so that she can be as best of a mom as she can be through that circumstance, because life still happens when you're pregnant. Yeah, that's a great point.
right, right.
Absolutely. So I want to go through our list of all the talks we discussed having, so that we'll see if we've missed anything. We've referenced resources. We can come back to that. Um, Brain and body changes. We discussed that. So let's shift to the resources. We talked about the OBGYN. We talked about counseling. And so on this list of resources that just got posted, the link is right there. If you click on that, it should take you to a Google shared drive of different resources. But there's also resources on that list for emergency type help of suicide crisis hotlines, of Postpartum Support International, as well as Emory Women's Mental Health Program. And so those are the local resources for you, that you can use to help find something if it's more of an urgent need. Like she was saying, like Dr. Jana was saying, about 20% of women pass by suicide, and that's higher than hemorrhaging. And so these resources can really be life and death and life saving for a lot of women. So that's going to be there. And if this is a recording that you're watching on our YouTube channel, that link will be in our description as well. Let's open it up to questions of anyone watching live. It should pop up in our studio chat here. And so if you have anything you were hoping us to talk a little more about, or any follow-up questions of anything we were sharing up until now, feel free to put it in the chat and we will hopefully see it. This is our first time going live, so we're just kind of learning as we go. And we'll be able to answer those questions. If you're watching the recording of this, feel free to drop any questions you have in the comments and we will circle back with answers. Or if there's enough good questions, we'll come back with another video answering those in detail. So let's give it a second to see if any questions pop up here.
So while we're waiting, I just wanted to, like, just another fact.
Sure, yeah.
50% of moms who experience postpartum depression actually experience symptoms of depression while they're pregnant. So again, this, one of my, if you only remembers, if you only remember this, if you're struggling, let your provider know, talk about it while you're pregnant, because having any kind of untreated anxiety or depression while you're pregnant is a recipe for a postpartum mood disorder once you deliver.
And when I look back and reflect, I was highly stressed and overwhelmed at my job. And I attributed depression-like symptoms to that circumstance so that I didn't share it. And hindsight being 2020, I could have used a lot of extra support because I was working a high-level stress job while pregnant. And then the sudden stop of everything, I think, was just overwhelming to my senses of I was going 1,000 miles an hour and now I've stopped and now I'm not sleeping. And so informing your provider, so essential, opening up the conversation. It's not shameful at all. That's what they're there for. That's what I mean, Janice, you can speak to this of you're eager to hear, how can I help? Right. And you can't wait to support a woman in this way.
Right.
All righty. Well, Saria, let us know if any questions are popping up that we can't see, because as of right now, I can't see anything in the chat, but I know you've sent us messages, so I know you can. So if you could quickly let us know if there's any questions that you're seeing on any of the social medias, and if not, we can save it for another video. No questions so far. Okay, so let's move to, is there anything, Janice, that you were hoping that we would talk about that we haven't hit yet? Any topics that are important to you to make sure to get that awareness and information out there?
I think the biggest things that were really important to me, we have talked about. Perinatal mood disorders are important. They're real. 50% of the time it starts in pregnancy. So there are things, your provider does want to hear about it. They want to know about it. Anxiety is a big player now too. It's not just depression. So if you're struggling with anxiety, that's also something to talk about. Untreated anxiety, traumatic prior deliveries. These are all things that or a traumatic this delivery. This delivery is disappointing. It doesn't go the way you want it to, or it's traumatic. Those are things to talk about with your provider. And, help is, sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it's a process to get you back to where you need to be, but help is available to you.
And there's so many great people out here, so many great counselors, so many providers who are eager, waiting to help, eager to be that listening ear so that you walk away feeling heard, understood, cared about. That's so rare in our culture nowadays. And so getting that support you need is so, so key. Well, thank you, Janice, for so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. If you need a little more help in this podcast, or if you want to dive deeper with a counselor of your own, there are wonderful counselors in your area that can help. You can follow up with us. Our information will be in the description below, or you can feel follow up with Janice. She's again with Inspire OBGYN located in Johns Creek. A great practice. I can attest to that, a great OBGYN practice. And her contact information will also be in the description below. So thank you again. And thank you, audience, for being with us in our first live or test run of doing a live and being a part of this conversation. So if there's another topic you would like to see us cover or any questions you would like us to go more into, leave those in the comments, and we'll be happy to circle back and either make a video for it or give you that answer directly. Okay. So I'm going to push the stop button, and that should